Ribs and mercy meat.
More on the story behind the grits next.
Thank you, guys. Good morning, everybody. Got some breaking news on the Trump administration's determination to crack down on illegal immigration. The numbers on securing the border are now in, and we're learning that arrests have more than tripled since just about a year ago. How about that? Good morning, everybody. I'm Bill Hammer, live inside of America. It's just housekeeping.
My newspapers, they were spread all over the desk.
Okay.
You're good. I'm trying to tidy up here as we're starting a show. Good morning, Bill.
Nice to see you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sandra Smith. According to the Homeland Security Department, the president has made it clear that he wants to secure our borders. Border agents have arrested more than 50,000 people in the month of May. It's the third straight month that has happened.
As for apprehensions, up more than 300% from the same time a year ago. William Lajeunesse watching all that. Dozens of trips to the border back in L.A. and William. So explain why the increase based on context of the numbers that you're looking at. Good morning.
Well, hey, good morning, Bill. So let's isolate the families and children. That's where we're seeing those big increases, 400% among families, 300% among unaccompanied minors. Most are from Central America, but we're also seeing more families from Mexico. On the push side, you have more violence in Mexico with the cartels in the south. You have that in Central America and, of course, a flat economy. On the pull side, jobs in America. And for Central Americans, that strong likelihood that women and children will be released to live with family members here in the U.S., even if they're here illegally. Now, the administration calls that a loophole. They want to close that by increasing shelter space and separating women and children as a deterrent. The Border Patrol says they're seeing apprehensions spread out across the border. Last year, half those apprehensions, Rio Grande Valley. Now, only 40% there. Apprehensions are seeing increases in Tucson, San Diego, and Yuma.
My men and women in the Border Patrol have been making the apprehensions. It's those loopholes in the system that need to be fixed, because those are the pull factors. That only lasts for so long, and then people start coming back if they know that they have the possibility of being released into the country.
And of course, Bill, you're going to see this being used politically, probably on the Hill, demands from the president for the wall, and probably more money. Bill?
So every month we see these numbers. What do you make of them after being there so often?
Well, you know, the high water mark was in 2000. You saw 1.6 million apprehensions. So you annualize these figures, we're looking about 500 to 600,000. That's way down. On the other hand, when President Trump took office with his tough rhetoric, that was a deterrent. Apprehensions were down to 15,000 a month. That was unheard of because smuggling organizations believe now, of course, that he couldn't make his promises stick. So now you're seeing these huge increases in numbers in families and unaccompanied minors. I think we have a graphic there. You know, from Mexico, again, you saw an increase, now 13,000 there with families and unaccompanied children. So what is the commissioner saying of Customs and Border Protection? Number one, a double standard on kids. If you're from a contiguous country like Mexico, we can return the kids immediately. That's not so with Central America. Number two, because of that Flores decision in the court, you have to release people within 21 days, that is women, children, and mostly minors. And number three, asylum. Only 80% of these families are meeting the credible fear standard on the front end, but only 20% can prove it to a judge. But by then, they're living in the U.S. It's impossible to find them and deport them. Officials are trying to reverse that by holding and prosecuting everyone.
We've doubled our prosecutions in the first 3 weeks of this initiative. That means that many more people crossing our border illegally are facing criminal consequences in addition to hopefully immigration removal.
That's, of course, he's talking about that zero tolerance program pushed by Attorney General Sessions. Bill, right now, it doesn't seem to be having that big of effect, but you don't turn around things overnight. Back to you.
Interesting stuff. William Lajeunesse, thank you with the numbers there out of L.A. today.
Meanwhile, another big story we're watching today ahead of next week's Singapore summit. Rudy Giuliani saying that Kim Jong-un begged for the sit-down with the president on his, quote, hands and knees. This as President Trump welcomes Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe today at the White House ahead of that North Korean summit next week in Singapore. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts is live on the North Lawn for us this morning. John, this is pretty strong language coming from Trump's team.
It is, and it really stands in sharp contrast to the language that President Trump has been using recently. The president has been very careful to use very diplomatic language toward North Korea, while at the same time remaining tough on North Korea with sanctions and a recent reminder to Kim Jong-un that things will not go well for him if he either bails on the summit or if he decides that he is going to confront the United States with nuclear weapons. Yesterday in Israel, though, Rudy Giuliani diverted from the official line, suggesting that Kim came crawling back to the United States after the president sent him that letter canceling the summit. Listen here.
They also said they were going to go to nuclear war against us. They were going to defeat us in a nuclear war. He said, well, we're not going to have a summit under those circumstances. Well, Kim Jong-un got back on his hands and knees and begged for it, which is exactly the position you want to put him in.
So far, no reaction to that characterization from North Korean officials. Don't forget, Rudy Giuliani is an outside attorney for the president. He's not a White House official. Had that statement come from somebody like, let's say, John Bolton, I'm sure the reaction from North Korea probably would have been pretty swift. The president has been employing the principle that you get more bees with honey than you do with vinegar. Last Friday, he had that hour and 15-minute long meeting with the North Korean Vice Chairman Kim Jong-chul, who you see at the left side of your screen there. The posture very warm and respectful as Kim was leaving. The president even standing there with Mike Pompeo and waving goodbye as Kim Jong-chul drove off. And North Korea knows full well, Sandra, they're dealing with the president on this. They're not dealing with Rudy Giuliani.
Fair point. And dealing with today's schedule, John, the president's meeting with Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe today. What ground are they expected to cover in that meeting?
You know, this is the second time that they met in 2 months. They were together in April down in Mar-a-Lago. Abe coming back here to the White House, the final strategy session before they have before the president heads off to Singapore for that meeting with Kim Jong-un. Abe wants to make sure that Japan's interests are represented at that summit. Japan very worried about intermediate ballistic missiles that North Korea has. They also want some resolution of the Japanese citizens who were kidnapped by North Korea. The president promised at that meeting in Mar-a-Lago that he would address both of those things. They've got a 2 o'clock press conference as well, so we'll be able to hear from both of them. Both Abe and the president headed for the G7 summit in Charlevoix, Quebec tomorrow. North Korea obviously will be on the agenda, but the major issues will be uncomfortable discussions on trade. The chief economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, saying that the G7 is not going to be a distraction for the president ahead of the North Korean summit. Listen here.
We're in the process of briefings and discussions here. And as I said at the top, the outline here is easy. Growth, trade, important bilateral talks.
The president this morning, though, complaining about what he sees as a distraction, the continuing Russia investigation, tweeting this morning, "Isn't it ironic? Getting ready to go to the G7 in Canada to fight for our country on trade. We have the worst trade deals ever made. Then off to Singapore to meet with North Korea and the nuclear program. But back home, we still have the 13 angry Democrats pushing the witch hunt." Isn't it ironic? Like rain on your wedding day.
Oh, my.
Alanis Morissette. I think we've all got that in our head this morning. After that tweet, John Roberts at the White House. Thank you.
He was waiting for that one. Thank you, John. Facing re-election, West Virginia Democrat Senator Joe Manchin now saying he regrets backing Hillary Clinton in election 2016. He's even hinting that he could back President Trump's bid for re-election. Manchin telling Politico endorsing her was a mistake. It was a mistake politically. Chris Steyerwalt here to analyze. How are you, sir? Good day to you.
I am well, Brother Bill.
I guess nothing focuses the mind quite like the possibility of defeat. What's going on with the windshield here with Senator Manchin?
Look, I think Manchin, and you know it's West Virginia politics, when Manchin basically said, look, she bribed me. She offered to build a dam in southern West Virginia. She offered these projects, work on these projects, and it was an exchange. I didn't want to back her because of what she said and believed about the coal industry, but I did it because she bribed me, and then she didn't win, so in the end it was a mistake. Now, I love, being a West Virginian, I love West Virginia politics because that's the Robert C. Byrd all the way. She promised me a pork barrel, and all I got was this lousy MAGA hat.
Hashtag. He also said this: Washington Democrats are making it more difficult for me to be a West Virginia Democrat. That's an allusion, I would believe, to the progressive nature of some of the Democratic politics in Washington.
How are you going to be pro-life? How are you going to be pro-gun? How are you going to be pro-coal and be a Democrat. Now, look, his party gives him pretty broad latitude to say and do what he needs to do to try to get reelected, as they do with Heidi Heitkamp in North Dakota, as they do with Claire McCaskill in Missouri, as they do with Joe Donnelly in Indiana. However, at a certain point, the brand just becomes too odious. It becomes too hard for West Virginians to vote Democrat, though I think, there are plenty who will be willing to do it. But Joe Manchin's going to have to prove his Trump bona fides, and his Trump sucking up is got to get even more intense.
That's going to be a pretty good race. We'll see how that goes. In the meantime, I want to get your reflection on what we saw on Tuesday. Ronna McDaniel, head of the RNC, said this about the results from Tuesday night. Watch.
That blue wave yesterday became a ripple, and I'll tell you why. Because the Trump agenda is working across this country, unemployment at record low, people are feeling better, wages are up, and they want to see this comeback continue, and they're not going to hand this nation over to the obstruct and resist Democrat Party of no.
Okay, now she obviously is, she's pitching her angle inside of what you saw on Tuesday night. You concluded that Democrats did what they needed to do on Tuesday night. I would conclude, Democrat or Republican, you can find good news in those results on Tuesday. Go.
I think for the Republicans, the good news on Tuesday is that Democratic turnout in California was not huge, right? Even with competitive races, Democratic turnout was only slightly higher than it was 4 years ago, and that doesn't point to the kind of intensity that they want to see to have a big smashing victory. That having been said, the Republicans didn't have a great night in the sense that Democrats picked the nominees that they needed. Remember all the talk they're going to get locked out of these races. Republicans were so excited. None of that happened. The Democrats in New Jersey, Democrats, and not just there, but in Iowa, New Mexico, and California, pick nominees who were moderate, matched their districts, were qualified and moderate. And the concern that Democrats have had throughout this process, would their base take them captive and not let them nominate the kind of candidates who can win in swing districts? Well, that's not what happened. They got who they needed, and they're plowing ahead.
Thank you, sir. As will we. Chris Starwell in Washington, D.C. Thank you. One more point on this whole Manchin thing. If his policies are best, I'll be right there. That's Joe Manchin's message to the people of West Virginia regarding President Trump in the election.
Fascinating stuff. All right. Well, meanwhile, we are awaiting the release of that big report that is expected to level some major criticism at former FBI Director James Comey and why he reportedly abused his power during his tenure. California Congressman Darrell Issa is here to react to that, plus this.
I'm really sorry that I said that word, but you know what? Civility is just nice words. Maybe we should all worry a little bit more about the niceness of our actions.
There's the apology. Samantha Bee is back on the air, but should she still have a job? We'll talk about that. Then there's this today. Watch.
Look at oh, look at your daughter-in-law, your new daughter-in-law.
An emotional reunion for a woman and her family after President Trump commutes her life sentence. What prompted the president to take action?
I'm feeling no handcuffs, nothing on me. I'm free to hug my family. I'm free to live life. I'm free to start over. I cannot. This is the greatest day of my life.
The IG has looked at his leadership model and found lacking. At the end of the day, the reason he jumped into the middle of the 2016 election was because he believed there was some intelligence compromising the Attorney General Loretta Lynch. I think the Department of Justice was in the tank for Clinton. The FBI did not do a very good job of looking at the Clinton email investigation. It was a sham investigation.
There was Senator Lindsey Graham last night with Sandra working for Martha. He calls it a sham amid a report that the Inspector General's draft report finds that James Comey defied authority as head of the FBI. California Congressman Darrell Issa served on the House Judiciary Committee. Sir, how are you? And good morning and welcome back to America's Newsroom. Go ahead and let's frame what we think we know based on the leak that went to ABC yesterday and how James Comey and Loretta Lynch behaved. What do you make of the report you've read right now?
Well, what we make of it is that there was insubordination or belligerent, arrogant attitude by the FBI director, and that pattern continued. It it was do what I want to do the way I want to do. For example, he suspected Loretta Lynch of misconduct, and yet he never kept memos of their meetings, but he kept a memo from day one with President Trump. Another example that's not in the report, but it bears listening and watching, is when he claimed he had to literally force Apple to hack their own phone, if you will, because, quote, it couldn't be done any other way. And then, of course, it turned out just the opposite was true. And yet he came before Congress and said it as an absolute when, in fact, it wasn't true at all. These kinds of actions, in addition to breaking protocol, both starting and stopping and announcing the Hillary Clinton activity, all of those show an arrogance that, by definition, is not befitting the director of the FBI.
It might be arrogant. It might be, I think the word in that leak report was insubordinate. But was any of it illegal that he did?
Well, it's not about illegal, and I think no one's accusing him per se of illegal activity. What we do realize is that he serves at the pleasure of the president, and if in fact he's arrogant, if in fact he's insubordinate, if in fact he has a double standard for Hillary and against Trump, all of those things are reasons to terminate him. And a lot of what this IG report is going to show is that he was properly terminated as somebody who really shouldn't be on the job. And I think that's probably the most important thing that's going to come out of it. Remember, this is a draft report, and the one thing I know over the years with draft IG reports is they're as strong as they're going to be when you first see them, and then after the defendants, if you will, the people involved, get to water them down a little bit with explanation, they tend to have softer edges. But the reality is this is an indictment of the behavior of Comey, more than sufficient to show he should have been terminated.
So that's going to justify the decision on behalf of President Trump, is what you're saying.
I think that, we've already seen that the president's decision to terminate him was a good one. To be honest, I wanted him terminated after he lied to us in the Apple case. And Mueller, for that matter, when he couldn't even name who was heading up the investigation on Hillary's emails. We've had a pattern at the FBI that they think they're above the law, and particularly when it comes to looking over their shoulder at the Department of Justice and their misconduct. And that's a lot of what this report is dealing with, is the Department of Justice has problems. The FBI, in fact, is simply a part of that problem.
Now, one last word on this, and we don't know what they're going to say about Loretta Lynch, rather, but it may not be favorable or it may not be flattering. The president is suggesting there has been a delay with the IG report going public. Do you see it that way, or is there cause to go ahead and eliminate some of the more confidential material?
I share the president's, if you will, frustration. This is typical of IG reports. They do take a long time in this final phase, and I think that should be changed. I think it should be shortened, but it's not atypical. This is a problem that we faced on the Oversight Committee, is that we would know a report was ready to go, and we might wait up to 8 weeks to actually get it. Meanwhile,
sounds like Washington.
Sounds like Washington.
Smells like the swamp. Sir, thank you for your time today, and I hope you come back. Okay, Darrell Ison from the Hill. Thank you.
President Trump says it's time to defend America from unfair trade policies that have been plaguing our nation for years. Charles Payne is on deck on that, plus mounting fears of sonic attacks after more U.S. diplomats are mysteriously falling ill again, where this has now happened. And a cameraman narrowly escapes a propane tank explosion. More on this incredible video after the break.
Payments. That's 1-800-418-1922. Online at drfieldrush.com.
Massive fire, California now under control this morning. The fire broke out yesterday after, look at this, an explosion at an industrial park ignited a 1,000-gallon propane tank. Look at that stuff fly, man. Whoa. That could kill you. That blast force and evacuation order since been lifted. No injuries reported. Everybody's okay, but that is quite the barbecue. 1,000-pound propane tank going up there. So, California fires out today. It's cool.
Thank you very much. And this.
Don't blame Trump. Blame the nations that have broken away. Trump's trying to fix this broken system. It was a good system. I agree with you. And it lasted for a bunch of decades. But that system has been broken in the last 20 years plus. I think free world trade is a very good thing indeed, but it is broken. And President Trump is trying to fix it.
President Trump's top economic advisor defending the president's trade policies ahead of this G7 summit, which comes after the president imposed steep steel tariffs on some fellow G7 countries. Heading into all of this, let's bring in Charles Payne, host of Making Money with Charles Payne on the Fox Business Network. So I'm trying to picture the mood at this G7 after all this drama. And you just heard Larry Kudlow. He's sticking to the president's message, and he's saying the world trade system is a mess. This is an effort to fix it, and fix it now rather than wait till
Absolutely,
later.
because the mechanisms aren't in place for it to fix itself. You know, it's interesting, to your point, the setting is sort of like one of those old Clint Eastwood spaghetti westerns, right? It's ominous, and it's a world against President Trump, and somehow these guys think they're going to shame President Trump or beat him into submission. I think they forgot, though, he went to Davos, which is an even bigger confab of the elitist establishment, and threw down a gauntlet then and there. Here's the irony about this being held in Canada and Trudeau taking the lead with respect to trying to put Trump in his place. Let me just talk about some of the tariffs that they already have against us or against the world. On dairy, 270%. Sausage, 70%, barley seeds, 57%, durum wheat, 49%, bovine/meat, 26%, even table linen, 18%. Here's what's really despicable. When the NAFTA agreement was put together, there was a loophole in this thing called unfiltered milk. It's used to make yogurt and stuff like that. American farmers were shipping this up to Canada like in the boatloads. In 2015, made $133 million on this. Canadian dairy farmers said, hey, why aren't we protecting that? So they did. So this idea that somehow they're our friends and that they've been playing fairly, that's just not true. It's just not honest. So let's fix it. Let's put everything on the table and let's fix it.
So the president obviously knows that heading into all this, and the White House has now confirmed that the president is going to have meetings with both Macron from France, his buddy and friend, of course, and Canada's Trudeau. So you just wonder what's gonna happen at this G7 summit with these world leaders.
I think something good could come out of it. What's not been talked about a lot this morning is in China this morning, their finance minister made some pretty impressive overtures saying that they really want to avoid a war. They really want to avoid an escalated trade war, that they're willing to make accommodations. We already know about the $70 billion, which, by the way, would be a 58% increase in what we sold to them last year. So they've already extended the olive branch, and now they're verbalizing. They're not throwing down the gauntlet. They're not rattling their sabers anymore. They're saying they want to cut a deal.
It seems the market is interpreting it as that the market sort of calmed down. Yesterday, we saw the Dow close at its highest level in 3 months, and I see that it's up again, pointing to a higher open in a couple minutes.
The market looks fantastic, and the buying, by the way, is going to other areas. You know, material stocks have led the market this week. In the last 3 months, it's been things like brick and mortar retailers that we wrote off. Several of those names are up 100% from their recent lows. So things are going very well. Our economy is firing on all cylinders. So, by the way, if President Trump is going to throw down the gauntlet and fight back against this, why not fight back now while our economy is doing great? And by the way, all those folks in the G7 or G6+1, they know the real deal.
The White House just confirmed he will be there. There was some speculation he wasn't going to show.
Yeah, well, I think he's going to show, and I think he's going to listen. He was the superstar in Davos, and I'm hoping we get something done.
All right, we'll keep watching it. Charles Payne, great to have you.
Guys.
Market's open. You got to get back to it.
That's right, Smitty. Charles Payne gives us perspective we do not get.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir. There's a new and growing threat now from is working to use a new weapon to carry out attacks, and why Homeland Security says we are not equipped to fight back. An update on what's happening on that. Sam.
Meanwhile, Rudy Giuliani calling out Robert Mueller and his team, why he says they are trying to, quote, frame the president. Former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee is here. He joins us next.
President Trump did not talk to, meet with, or have anything to do with Russians at any time during the 2016 election. Stop the investigation, put out your report, and let the chips fall where they may. They are a group of 13 highly partisan Democrats that make up the Mueller team, excluding him, are trying very, very hard to frame him, to get him in trouble when he hasn't done anything wrong.
Rudy Giuliani continuing to sound off, now saying the special counsel Mueller and his team are trying to frame the president for collusion with Russia they know never happened. We're joined now by former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee, host of Huckabee During Weekends over on TBN, and he joins us now. Governor, good morning to you. So what do you make of that? Giuliani, these words he shares with us from Tel Aviv. He's over there for a conference, and he says Mueller's team's trying to frame the president.
Well, Giuliani has sort of been the point man, going out with the most inflammatory rhetoric of anybody on the legal team. I don't know if this is planned. I don't know if he's gone rogue. I simply don't know. But what he said essentially is correct. There seems to be an effort on the part of the special prosecutor to keep looking. They've spent $17 million, haven't presented anything that ties to the president whatsoever. They've made it clear he's not even a target of the investigation. But it makes it difficult for him to do his job because of the distractions. And they need to bring this thing to a conclusion, either rope this calf and bring it in, or let the rope go and call the rodeo over. But it's gone on too long.
Well, the president talked about that being a distraction in this tweet this morning, saying, quote, "Isn't it ironic? Getting ready to go to the G7 in Canada to fight for our country on trade. We have the worst trade deals ever made. Then off to Singapore to meet with North Korea and the nuclear problem. But back home, we still have the 13 angry Democrats pushing the witch hunt, Governor."
Well, I think he's exactly right, and that's why it needs to be over. You know, one of the things that I admire most about President Trump is his ability to ignore all of the noise around him and just focus on what he wants to do. He'll tweet about it, he'll react, he'll make a comment about it, but as you can tell, it doesn't really keep him from focusing on whether it's the trade imbalance that we have with many countries who are whining like kids who didn't get invited to the birthday party over it. Or whether it's North Korea, which he has them closer to a denuclearization than we've seen in 70 years. So I think all of these things kind of point to the fact of why Donald Trump is being an effective president, but also, Sandra, why he is just so annoying to people on the other side of the aisle as well as to the media. But then I repeat myself, because he just doesn't seem to slow down in his focus on getting the American economy back and making America strong and feared.
And meanwhile, I got to ask you about this report that came out yesterday. Senate Republicans releasing this report on the Obama administration granting Iran this secret access to the U.S. financial and banking system. I didn't get your reaction to that yet.
Well, it's first of all illegal. There's some people that need to be fitted for orange jumpsuits if they can find out exactly who it was that allowed the United States and Iran to enter into these arrangements, which violated both the law, and then who lied to Congress about it. Who went to Congress and said, nope, everything's fine, we're doing this legally? Well, they weren't. And it is an incredibly serious thing. If Robert Mueller wants to investigate something, there's something right there I think his 13 happy warriors ought to turn their attention to, because there's something of substance to be looked
Obviously,
at.
some big questions there over whether officials misled Congress over getting that deal done with Iran. Meanwhile, Mike Pompeo tweeted this out. We're watching reports that Iran plans to increase its enrichment capacity. We won't allow Iran to develop a nuclear weapon. Iran is aware of our resolve. It's another example of Iran foolishly squandering its resources. It should surprise no one if protests in Iran continue. What are your expectations, Governor?
If Iran continues to push this, I think they need to realize that Donald Trump, Jim Mattis, Mike Pompeo, John Bolton, and the entire national security team are not the amateurs, and neither are they the wimps and wusses that they've been dealing with before. We know that Iran is sponsoring terrorism through Hezbollah and Hamas. They're the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world. They kill and kidnap Americans, and America's not going to put up with it. And I think we will team with Israel and anybody else who has the guts to go in and say, you want a nuclear power? You're not going to get it. And we're simply going to do whatever it takes, including military action, to make sure that those capacities are destroyed.
I want you to go rest that voice. Everybody wants to hear from you. You've been talking to us last night, this morning. Always good to have you. Governor Huckabee, thank you.
Thank you, Sandra.
Bit of a frog in the throat, huh? Frog in the throat for Cleveland. Game 3 NBA Finals. LeBron trying to spark some life into the Cavs. Playing at home. Check it out early first period. Watch this here.
James up and under, throws it off the backboard. Oh, what a perfect pass.
The replay's even better. LeBron throws it to himself. Showstopper.
Kevin Durant
sadly,
outside.
Sandra.
Delivers.
Not enough to hold back the Warriors. The script then flipped to the Kevin Durant show. 43 points, 13 rebounds. Golden State wins on the road 110-102, which makes our little wager a little lopsided.
I mean, this is just kind of getting embarrassing, Hammer.
Right.
I mean there really isn't a wager I haven't won.
Yeah, well, I mean, this was a layup for you, though. I mean, you got to pick Golden State, right?
Hey, at least it was a close game.
Well, it was reasonably close. But that game one, I mean, you stole game 1 from me. But J.R. Smith should have made the layup.
Winning.
We'd be talking about a whole new series here.
Okay. Cry me a river.
You gotta win one more, kid.
And we gotta move on to this. Samantha Bee going back on the air for the first time since her vulgar remarks on the president's daughter, Ivanka Trump. And it ignited a firestorm.
I want this show to be challenging and I want it to be honest, but I never intended it to hurt anyone except Ted Cruz.
Ooh. The comedian also apologizing to Ivanka, but should she still have a job? Samantha Bee, that is.
We'll debate that. Also, First Lady Melania Trump making her first public appearance in about a month. So how she is doing today. That's coming up next.